If you or any of your children are identifying as gay or lesbian or are considering it, this episode was meant for you. If this decision is a struggle for you, please take the time to listen through this whole episode. It's not an accident that you're hearing this. This message was meant for you and it will change your life. I brought a guest who will share her own personal experience because she wants you to know that you are seen, known, and loved. So don't go anywhere. This program is made possible by financial support from Smile Online Course and Books. Smile Online offers online courses for teens and young adults designed to help them master social and career skills. Subject matter includes customer service skills, job interviewing, electronic etiquette, and managing stress. For more information, visit thefatherhoodchallenge.com. That's thefatherhoodchallenge.com.
Welcome to the Fatherhood Challenge, a movement to awaken and inspire fathers everywhere to take great pride in their role and to challenge society to understand how important fathers are to the stability and culture of their family's environment. Now, here's your host, Jonathan Guerrero.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me in part 1 of this episode called Lesbian to Restore Daughter of God. My guest is Hope Harris. Hope Harris is a former LGBTQ rights activist who publicly identified as a lesbian from a young age. She has had interactions with Christians protesting at gay rights rallies and events, which led her to believe that God and his followers hated members of the LGBTQ community. Today, we are here to hear her story of how God reached her and revealed the truth of her identity and purpose in life, and how to hear what God is trying to say to you. Hope, welcome to the Fatherhood Challenge.
Hey, thank you so much, Jonathan, for having me. And I'm honored to be here and share my story with you.
Hope, I'm eager to hear your story, and I know the audience is too. So I'm going to just sit quietly and just give you the mic and let it go from here.
Well, thank you, everyone, for tuning in. As Jonathan alluded to, I identified as a lesbian as early as 11 years old. And I fully engaged and understood boys my age much better than girls. I really didn't want to play house. I didn't like dress up. I was more likely to disassemble Barbie than to play with her. And I am born kind of a tom girl by nature. I love climbing trees, being outdoors, sports, and natural leadership skills. That's just who God created me to be. And none of that says that I was born gay, but I did believe that to be true. By the time I hit puberty, I was far more interested in the same thing boys were, and that was to date girls. And I'm 65 this year into 2025. And that was a big no, not ever talked about in any realm or circle except in the dark. And so it was a big struggle for me to feel very other than. As I entered my teen years, I became somewhat of a loner and did my own thing, ditched school a lot, found trouble just easily. That was accessible to me. By the time I graduated from high school, I eventually landed in Seattle, Washington in my early 20s, and I loved the LGBTQ community there. And I fell right in. I'm very hardwired for social justice. And I began to devote my time and energy towards promoting fair housing, equal job opportunities for LGBTQ plus folks, and then immerse myself in that culture as well. And so by the time I was organizing protests, participating in protests, I was encountering folks that were on the other side of the protest line who were saying very hurtful things like, all gays are going to hell. And then they'd have a little Bible verse attached to it, and God hates gays. And it became often for me, just because of that social justice thing that kind of raged within me, it became where you are so wrong. How can God be a God of love and then condemn someone to hell? And how can you say God is love but hate someone? And that conflict kind of rose inside of my head. And I was like, man, I really don't want anything to do with these so-called people who say God is love, but then tell me that he hates me. And I really kind of pigeonholed Christians to be people that wanted to be right rather than care for people. I progressed in that lifestyle. Eventually, I had a long-term partner of 15 years. I was in a severe car accident when I was in the age of 46 and went through the car window and broke or blew discs in my neck and back, pulled all the cartilage away. It was really painful. It took about 5 years worth of recovery to get back to even being able to read and write and do some of the things that just naturally come to us. But as a result of all the injuries I had, it took time to recover, which left me with a lot of time to process things that I had not processed as a teenager, like, who are you and why are you here? And the fact that I was not immersed in activism and not seeing my regular set of friends. In fact, you kind of, when you get that severely injured, you realize who your true friends are. And you just end up with a handful of people. My partner was not happy that I was in this accident and often told me, hey, I didn't sign up for this part in sickness and in health. You're supposed to be taking care of me. Hurry up and get better. And it caused a lot of conflict within our relationship. And that went on for about 3 years. It did come to physical blows at times, lots of screaming and shouting. Income was limited because I had to go on Social Security disability to just kind of recover and couldn't work. And so life radically changed. I do remember my Jewish partner and I going to the high holidays, which are in the fall of every year, and sitting in a synagogue and saying, God, if you're real, I really need you to show yourself to me. And he did over the course of the next 3.5 months. Part of my therapy was to get on Facebook and to adjust my squanitors so I could see things and begin to read those small little captions. And they were in major print. So, you would tease me today if you saw how big the print was to just read a post or a response or anything. I was like reading 1 or 2 words at a time. And so I was reconnected with a friend of mine that I knew to be a true Christian in my mind. I also believe she hated me, but she turned out to be someone that reached out to not only me, but to my partner and began to do things for us, try to help us resolve our conflicts, which, that's really hard to do from a phone call away and not really knowing either of us very well. But, she did things like send us, gifts in the mail that would bless both of us or, bless us with a gift card to go out to eat or different things. And I had some medication issues that came up that made it I was a little bit unstable and went to the doctor and had to go through a 6-week detox. And my partner decided that was a great time to go to New York and be with her family. And my friend that I was talking to invited me to come to East Texas. Well, remember, I'm from Seattle. East Texas is Poduntville. It's lots of small communities, and most folks live out in the country. There are some that live in the small towns that might be 80,000 or less in population. So that it was not like, yeah, I'm never going to move here. And plus y'all and I don't line up for politics, and I'm pretty sure Texans hate LGBTQ people. And I had the whole mindset. So I came for a 3-week visit. My friend and her husband are in the medical field and were working for the state and did 3-day relief hospice for children that were dying and their parents to get away, who were the full-time caregivers. And so my friend would come home for 3 days and say, so let me ask you this. If you're for gay marriage, why aren't you married? And it's like, oh, we're waiting until it is legal across the country. That's like 2009. So 6 years before it became legal. But really the reality was my partner was like, I don't want to get married. And that hurt me because I was on my way in career path wise to going to Washington, D.C. to be a lobbyist for gay marriage. And so, I'm sitting with heavy questions like that. Well, what do you want most in life? Well, I want peace. Good. Let me share this with you. In John 14:27, it says, Jesus says, my peace I leave with you, not as the world gives, but I give unto you. And that one really struck me. And so my friend went away for 3 days, leaving me with that verse that ruminated in my head. And I was like, wow. Okay, so I've tried Buddhism, I've tried Judaism, I've tried meditation, I've tried shamanism, and like I get bits of peace, but it doesn't last. But Jesus is saying that he's leaving me peace when he goes away, and I want to know more about that. And that kind of opened the door for my friend to share the gospel with me. She woke me up, she came home, woke me up from church on a Sunday morning and said, hey, we're going to church. And I'm like, yeah, have a good time. I'm not going to church. And, I am for sure certain that Texan Christians have a special hatred for people like me. And so, and at that time, I fully dressed in men's clothes. I did not identify as transgender. I just was more comfortable in my skin, looking like and acting like I was more a man than a woman, but it was still obvious I was a woman. And so we got up, we got dressed, we went to church, and the church in this very small town with very straight, well-designed, all the street names were the same, went the same way, nothing changed. She could not find this church she wanted to go to. And this is a woman that grew up in this community. So she should have been able to find the church. So we ended up in the parking lot of a Baptist church, and it was big. It was like there were hundreds of cars in the parking lot. And I'm like, I am not going in this building. And we happened to get there an hour before the service was to let out. So she said, great, let's have a Bible study. And she pulled out this ginormous Bible. I mean, I was just like, really? Oh, we're going to go there now, are we? And so she pulls it out to the only scripture I happened to have had memorized. And it was from 1 Corinthians 6:9-11. She started reading the whole list about homosexuals and drunkards and, people that gorge themselves on food. And something clicked. I would now say it's the Holy Spirit in retrospect. I heard the list, and it just so happens that homosexuals are in the middle of the list. And what stood out to me is that writers, predominantly when they make a list, they try to put the most two important things on the beginning and the end. And the stuff in the middle is just as important, but they want to emphasize those other things. I'm like, well, that's interesting. Then I heard verse 11 for the first time ever. But such were some of you. And I'm like, wait, this horrible list of people that are far worse than me, and I was born this way, you're saying we can all change. And I was just like, okay. So then my friends said, well, we've talked a lot. I've asked you a lot of questions. I know that the question I asked you about peace really has hit you, and you've asked some questions about Jesus. And I just want to ask you, Hope, do you want the peace that Jesus is offering? And I'm like, yeah, but I'm kind of confused by this part that such were some of you. So you're really saying that if I become a Christian, that I'm going to go from gay to straight. And I just don't see that. And she goes, but really it's your heart that matters. Do you want to invite Jesus in your heart to give you peace? Are you willing to surrender your heart and acknowledge the things that you know are a sin? Because in Jewish culture, I was pretty sure what was sin by going to synagogue with my partner at least 3 or 4 times a year, because I was a good Jewish partner of a Jew. And, just like good Christians who go to church on Christmas and Easter, we went at least to the high holidays and Passover, and maybe a few times extra during the year. But during the high holidays, you make atonement for the things that you've done wrong to others. And I could acknowledge that my wrongs were more like bitterness towards my partner, because she did not want to care and support for me when I was in this car accident. I could acknowledge that I had some lingering hurt from abusive parents growing up. And I was willing to go that far. And I say, these are the sins I know to be true for me, Jesus. I want to invite you into my heart, and I want your peace. But I really don't know you. But here I am today asking for your peace. And that's where we started at. Over the course of the next week and a half or so, I waited to call my partner, and then I called her about 3 days after that happened. That was February 14th, 2009. So it's February 14th is my birthday in my spiritual life. And I called my partner and I said, hey, I have something to tell you. She's going, what's that? I became a Christian. She goes, that's great. We'll go to a gay affirming church. I'm sure it'll be okay. We'll go together. I'll support you in this. And I'm like, no, I don't think you understand. And I really was shocked that these words were coming out of my mouth. I think I became a Christian. And there was dead silence on the end of the phone. And about a minute later, she said, don't come home. And I was like 5 days from coming back to Seattle. When I got off the phone, I was like, wow, I don't know if she's serious or she's in shock. I'm going to go with she's in shock. And, I got on a plane 5 days later, flew into Seattle, and my closest friend picked me up at the airport and said, hey, your partner has a headache, and so I'm here to take you home. So she dropped me off. I got my keys out, and I had my dog with me because it was a long time, and she had been in New York to be gone, and I didn't want to leave my dog with anyone. So went up to the condo, and the key didn't work. I knocked on the door. Nobody was answering the door. Rang the doorbell. Text, no response. And I go back out to my car, and I'm like, okay, I got the keys to my car, and I'll just go get something to eat and come back. Well, my bank card didn't work anymore. I got this text, you are no longer welcome in our house. So I literally went from having a place that I shared and co-owned to homeless in that instant. And over the next 8 weeks, my friend in Texas connected me to somebody in Seattle that we both knew, and worked on a church staff that I had protested the church because they had a co-op. I had a co-op with the pastor about I kissed a girl because 2 girls at a prom in the local high school came and kissed each other in public, and it was a big brouhaha back in the mid 2000s. And so this friend started having coffee with me, or lunch or dinner every day, and walking with me and helping me get to know Jesus. And then I had a decision to make, because there was no movement about I could move back in. And what I now call radical amputation took place, because the best option was to come to Texas, which I really didn't want to do, wasn't in my life plan. But I ended up in East Texas, eventually found a church there, was discipled by a church receptionist. And then she got sick, and a pastor came out to me and said, I think you're supposed to take her place. And I did. And I said, but here's the deal. I am gay, and this is East Texas, He goes, well, here's the deal. If you ever decide to go out and hook up, just don't come back to work. And we shook on it. And I never quit that job. And then God moved me to Dallas. I then went through a 4.5-year journey to resolve my faith in sexuality. In reality, I wanted to resolve that God was wrong, and so we're Christians, and that I was born this way and God created me this way, and it was okay. But instead, what I discovered was that God had an intended design for sexuality, gender, and marriage, and that God gives us boundaries so that we will have a good life and all will go well for us. And I discovered the goodness of God in his intended design and purpose, and that the fall took place. And I didn't like the word sin nature, but the fall when Adam and Eve said, I know better than you, God, and I'm going to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I don't care about the consequences, even though God said there would be consequences. And that all began to make sense to me. And it was like, so if every part of our being and our humanity is impacted by those choices that happened in the garden, then surely a broken sexuality and a broken gender identity can be part of that experience. And the answer is to restore my relationship with God and to go all in with God. And during that time, I'm just going to read the scripture and I'll land it here, is that this verse came during that period of time towards the end of it. And it's from Mark 8:34 through 37. And it is from the Message version because that was the version that God really spoke to me when I first became a Christian. Jesus said, calling to the crowd, come join his disciples. And he said, anyone who intends to come with me has to let me lead. You're not in the driver's seat. I am. Don't run from suffering. Embrace it. Follow me and I'll show you how. Self-help is no help at all. Self-sacrifice is the way to saving yourself, your true self. What good would it do to get everything you want and to lose the real you? What could you ever trade your soul for? I have to say that when I came to that part about your true self, I was like, wait, I know who my authentic self is. I'm a lesbian. I'm attracted to women. And that's all there is to it. But what's this true self that the Bible is talking about? That Jesus, this guy that I thought was so cool that I've been discovering as I read the New Testament, he was saying there was a difference between my authentic self and my true self. And my true self, what was it? And then I kept coming back to Genesis, and my true self was a woman created in the image of God on purpose, with a purpose. And God was intentional about gender and relationally that we would marry members of the opposite sex. And I was like, oh, wow, that's heavy. Then it was like, hey, what will you ever do to get everything you want and lose yourself? Are you willing to trade that for your relationship with God? And I was like, whoa, that's heavy. So I was left with a choice. And my choice was either the Bible was absolutely true and had the right to inform my life, or I could cherry pick what I wanted to believe in the Bible, or I could absolutely reject it and walk away. But the thing that kept me was John 14, because the day I invited Jesus in, peace consumed my being. And I wasn't willing to give that peace up. And I wasn't willing to walk away from Jesus, who not only was he my Savior, but he was the Messiah, the chosen one that came to redeem humanity and to restore us all to right relationship with Jesus. And since that time, in the last 7 or so years, so I've been a Christian 16 years, I have began to walk with families, talk with people that are wrestling with their faith and sexuality or struggle with same-sex attraction, and be able to, God has used my story to help people wrestle with those things and walk the muddy waters of faith and sexuality and gender.
In the very, very beginning, when you were talking about how you would go to the protests and you would encounter, maybe you call them radical Christians, that were in your face and very, very defensive and were insulting. My experience was very, very different from yours, but mine was an experience rooted deeply into witchcraft, into, you mentioned shamanism, new age, all of that stuff. And in my experience, what I learned on the other side of that experience is that one of Satan's strategies is to get you in as deep as he can get you into whatever that might be, whatever sin might be. And then what he does, what he likes to do, is on the flip side of it, he loves to shame you and he loves to mock you for being in that sin. And so you feel trapped with no way out. And so most just retreat deeper. So that was the picture in my mind of what was happening to you during that time. Very, very much a satanic strategy. And he laughs because the whole time that this is happening to you, you are completely unaware that he's behind it all. And so what you'll do is you'll go and you'll lash out at the Christians, or you'll, in your case, or in my case, it was pretty much all Christians. I would lash out at them. They are the ignorant, unenlightened ones, and they're just plain stupid. And I'm the one that somehow has it figured out. But at the same time, I also can't escape this knowledge deep down inside that what I am doing at some point is wrong, and it just never goes away. And there's this conviction bug. So it's like two forces that play against each other, and then play against each other with you in the middle. And then they shove you deeper into your sin and into the darkness that you're in. So it's a really cruel form of what Satan does to bait you and keep you enslaved and keep you repressed from that peace that Jesus promises. I didn't expect to go there, but that was very strongly in my mind while you were talking about that. Mm-hmm. So on that note, this is a great place to wrap up part 1 of this episode called Lesbian to Restored Daughter of God. If you've been listening to my conversation with Hope Harris, part 2 will continue in the next episode.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fatherhood Challenge. If you would like to contact us, listen to other episodes, find any resource mentioned in this program, or find out more information about the Fatherhood Challenge, please visit thefatherhoodchallenge.com. That's thefatherhoodchallenge.com.